Hello, BookTube. I've been watching BookTube, of course, it's my entertainment, and I've been watching a lot of people doing September TBRs, uh, in which they hold up and talk about the books they're going to be reading in the month of September. And of course, I want to join in, but this is another one of those examples where uh, I'm going to have to adapt BookTube things to suit me. I'm heart and soul a booktuber now. I'm sold on this endeavor, but I am a little bit different than most booktubers in terms. I mean, for instance, the books that I'll be reading in September are almost all, except for gems I might find at the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston, uh, published in March of 2017. And what good does that do the rest of you? One or two of those during a mail opening, maybe, but a whole video of them. That's here's a whole bunch of books that are going to come out when we're all a lot older and grayer. I So I thought I would do something a little different. Not September TBR, uh, but September TBR BY, September to be read by you, in which I go over 10 books that are coming out in September that are well worth your time. Now, these things are right on the horizon. Some of them might be out already, which means you can go to your library with the title and author of any of these that look of interest to you and demand that they order it or request it or interlibrary loan it or any of the other things that Beck from Beck's book can tell you all about how to do it. Or you could, if you were flush for money, go to a bookstore or, your favorite discount site, book depository or whatever, and buy it. You certainly, if you do that, you certainly have my recommendation for these 10 books. I thought I'd go through 10 books with you. And if you like this, then I'll do a TBR BY for every month. So just to help you out. I am definitely going to do something like that for the holidays when I know you'll all be shopping around for, friends and relatives and whatnot. But I can happily do it every month. But anyway, so I thought we'd start with him again. Hitler, Ascension by Volker Ullrich, which is an enormous 1,000-page biography of Hitler up until 1939. So the soldier, the would-be artist, the political agitator, the crackpot author of Mein Kampf, and the rising politician who eventually gets to the world stage, gets control of one of the most powerful industrial nations in the world. And it's a time period and a subject that's been covered before many, many times, and I very much recommend the new English language translation of this book. I think it's from Yale. Even though I read the original as well, and the original is something in this case is lost in the translation. There's a particular capacity of scholarly German for a kind of barbed tartness, and English also has that capacity, as you'll know if you read, for instance, the any works of criticism by Oxford Dons at the end of the 19th century and the turn of the 20th century. But you have to be familiar with it in order to reproduce it, and I don't think the translator is. So some of that is simply lost. If you can, I highly recommend reading it in German. But if not, the English version certainly captures enough. It's an amazing work. So I highly recommend it if you or someone that you know likes that big, huge World War II era, biography of World War II figures. And then, speaking of World War II figures, that's another one. This is Hero of the Empire by Candice Millard. We've seen this on this channel before. This is her retelling of the story of Winston Churchill's adventures in the military when he was just a wave-faced little lad. He had adventures. He was captured. He was imprisoned. He escaped. He rode a horse under fire. He took part in one of the last cavalry charges in the Western Hemisphere. It's a grand story. And Candice Millard, you might know her name. She's done wonderful books. She knows how to tell a really good popular history story. As I mentioned earlier on this channel, the only problem that she has, the only competition that she faces in this story is Churchill himself, who wrote the story in the exact time frame that she's doing. And she faced that problem before with her book River of Doubt, about the jungle expedition undertaken by ex-President Theodore Roosevelt. He also wrote up that, and he wrote a humdinger of an account. So his and Churchill's accounts stand in the historical record as accounts of these things. And Candice Millard does a great job in this book, as she did in the earlier book, of taking that great story and giving it the historical context that the living authors couldn't do. So they don't displace those earlier works. I highly recommend them both, but this is a wonderful adventure story, and it and the Hitler book I will be reviewing for the Christian Science Monitor. So I will try to point that out to you when it happens. And then next we have a novel. This is can you see it there? Eimear McBride's The Lesser Bohemians, which has won a couple of high-profile literary awards. It's the story of a young girl from the provinces who comes to 1990s London to join the theater world, and it's a wonderful portrait of that world in all of its horrible, gluttonous, substance-abusing glory. But it's more than that. That would make it just an entertaining historical piece. But those of you who might be familiar with McBride, she wrote A Girl's a Half-Formed Thing. She has a very, very individual prose style. It's incantatory, it's semi-poetical, it's semi-Joycean. She, I think, pulls it off beautifully. It's not anything you can read quickly, and you have to savor it. You roll her phrases around in your mouth, and it's just, if you're up for that kind of a fictional read, not straightforward. It's much different from that. She plays all sorts of very intelligent, very intentional games, not just with narrative, but with voice. If you want that in your fiction, then this is probably the best example this year will afford. And it's also a humdinger of a story. The next one is back to history. This is something we've seen on this channel. This is Pax Romana by Adrian Goldsworthy, who did a very, very popular big history, a biography of Julius Caesar. This is his history of the process by which Roman arms, Roman manpower, and Roman roads, Roman supply lines, the Roman military way of thinking conquered a large chunk of the Western world. It could just stop at that, but it doesn't. It's not just battle, 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 success, 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 ave, ave, ave. Instead, there's a lot more. He thinks a lot deeper in it than that. It's my favorite of his books so far. And if you have a military history fan, a Roman history fan, it's a surefire bet. It's a surefire winner in September, or if you are such a person. The next one, controversial. We'll go back to fiction. It's Here I Am by Jonathan Safran Foer. His first novel in, I think, over a decade. It is starting to get what I predict, of course, will be a tsunami of critical responses, including from some critics that I know and some critics that I very much respect. Some of the foremost reviewers of fiction, which I fully admit I am not, will come out of the woodwork to review this book. They'll have to. And the reviews have been mostly negative. Those reviewers have mostly said it's posturing, it's name dropping, it's concept dropping, it's Holocaust porn. It's the Sam Sachs in the Wall Street Journal. There have been viewers all over who have pointed out it's admittedly noticeable structural flaws, including one in the plot itself, where the troubled suburban marriage at the heart of the story is rocked to its foundations by a gigantic disaster that should reshape the thinking of the whole world, and doesn't. It doesn't. The author's self-absorbed, nitpicking suburban husband and wife are still self-absorbedly nitpicking after the disaster as much as before. It barely affects their lives at all, except the husband is put out by the price of a plane ticket, which you'd think would be reason to dismiss it out of hand. But critics aren't doing that, and they shouldn't, because it's brilliant. It's deeply flawed, and makes it possible, if you meta-read it, to dislike the author even more than you already did. But even so, the reason that it's provoking these kinds of responses is because it's major literature. and it announces that fact in every line and every paragraph, in my opinion. If you are a serious reader of contemporary fiction, if that's the part of your library or bookstore that you haunt, to follow the main currents of the novels that may be read in 100 years, 200 years, then this is one of the only novels this season that you have to read. And it's also, I know it feels Philistine for me to point it out in the presence of so many superior fiction critics, but it's also really enjoyable to read, which, I said that earlier on about Jay McInerney, that that's not a small thing. It's a thing that fiction critics tend to forget when they're going after much bigger game, but an Old Bailey hack can't forget it for a minute. It's not easy to write effortlessly readable prose. So there's that. And then we go on to another novel, a little bit biased here. This is The Wonder by Emma Donoghue. A story about a young woman who claims that she is not eating anymore, that she's living on manna from heaven. The story is much more complex than that. It builds out from there. It is those of you who read her book Room will know. She can take a kernel and just build layers on it without needing to go far afield from the kernel itself. It's amazingly good. I loved it. So that's two Irish lasses whose novels made this list. And is that all entirely wrong? I mean, we have been your storytellers for 10 centuries. And these are both great examples of that. But then we go to another novel, also great storytelling, with, I suspect, not a drop of Irish blood. This is The Fortunes by Peter Ho Davies, what I think is by far his best book yet, which tells the separate but braided together stories of different Chinese immigrants to America, the different aspects of immigration, what their different lives are like, which sounds programmatic, and that's what I thought the book would be. When I first heard about it, I thought, well, okay, I can predict virtually every line of this thing, but no, it's beautifully done. I wholeheartedly recommend it. If you like contemporary fiction, you should read it. I also think it's always tough to tell, but I think that it announces an upping in Peter Ho Davies' game as a fiction writer. I think when it starts to get reviews, that will be the tenor of them. Will be, well, okay, he was what in an ungenerous earlier age used to be called a mid-list author before, but he's not anymore. And I would applaud that if it happened, because he's always been incredibly talented. I think this is just a home run of a book. And next one, we'll do YA, because I am learning from book 2. Francina Simone. This one is The Bombs That Brought Us Together by Brian Conaghan. A very good, very touching story about a boy who lives in a town where everything is regulated, but the old country right next door to that town, nothing's regulated, and the town that he lives in is very strict about that, very strict about anything connected with that. So the story kicks off when he meets a boy from that old country, and they start to cause trouble. And it's longer than in most YA books that I read, and it's also a wonderful examination of friendship and the things that it can do, the way that it can broaden your perspective on who you are and where you live. I thought it was an amazingly assured performance. So if you want smart YA, something that isn't going to just bore you, this is it. This is a good example of that. And then we'll do two more. The two that have my highest recommendation. The first one is something we mentioned here before, Daniel Levitin's Field Guide to Lies. The subtitle is Critical Thinking in the Information Age. And it's about how you break down all the stuff you see online. There are parts of it that are about stuff that isn't online, but of course the thrust of it is the internet, which imports into our lives vast amounts of utterly unfiltered, unvariegated information, just dumps it on us. And some of you, when you don't want to work or you're procrastinating from writing, intentionally go in search of even more of that stuff that the internet does. And that tsunami of stuff, of information, raw information, requires greater critical assessment than an audience for the outside world has ever needed to have before. You didn't need those filters when your outside world was each successive month's volume of the new Encyclopedia Britannica delivered to your door. Now, you can see a video of something, and it takes you 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 intense viewings to recognize that it's photoshopped, that it is not real. And then when you're done with that, you realize, okay, well, that attention for the 2 or 3 or 4 times necessary to figure that out is what was sought after. That's what I paid to do this. And if I'd thought about it ahead of time, I wouldn't have paid it for such a trivial thing. And on and on and on. And the book covers that marvelously. You won't think about your online time again the same way after you've read this book. So I highly recommend it. And the last one, another long video. I'm going to work on this. I promise I am. The last one was also something we've seen on this channel. I hadn't read it. Now I have. And I want to sing its praises from the highest rooftop. It's this. It's Eyes on the Street by Robert Kanigel. This is his biography of the civil planner and author Jane Jacobs. And I thought, again, like with the Peter Ho Davies, I thought it would be fairly programmatic. But it isn't. It isn't. It's fantastic. Just fantastic. It might very well be the best biography I read in 2016. Not just for the research that it does, because we've seen that, before here with contemporary biographies, but for the tone, for the writing. The writing is so exuberant. It's pretty clear that he read her writings in depth while or before he wrote this book, and sort of had her looking over his shoulder, because she could take just about anything except crappy writing and never wrote crappily. And so it had to have occurred to him at some point that about this subject in particular, I cannot write a programmatic book. I must write something that has heart and spirit and lots of forward momentum. And this one does. Oh, God, does it ever. Even if you're not interested in Jane Jacobs, you will be by the time you finish it. If you want a marvelous life reading experience, you should go with this book. And there you have it. That is the September TBR BY. And I will list all these books down below so that you don't have to pause and forward through an already horrendously long video. And I will see you soon, BookTube, and I will work on this, on getting back to the dream, the El Dorado of a 5-minute video. I'm surprised it took this long for this to become a problem. I'll see you soon, BookTube. Thank you.